This point, this is Poetry Unit 3, and this is the introduction. If you look under the Poetry Unit menu, that's the first file. I'm just going to introduce you to a few terms fairly briefly, and you can look at them in more detail. The first thing is meter. So meter is the pattern of stressed and unstressed syllables in a verse or in the lines of poetry. That's what gives it the musical feeling. So it gives it kind of an up and down sorts of feeling, right? Makes it musical, just like the little nursery rhymes when you're a child and you listen to Hickory Dickory Dock, the mouse ran up the clock, and you can remember it because it has that feel to it, right? Okay, so then just to give you a picture of it, this here is an example. All right, so if it's not stressed, it looks like that, whereas if it's stressed, it has the line. So the way that you would read this, if you knew the meter, it would look like this. To be or not to be. That is the question. And so it tells you sort of how it should be said. And that is your first example of meter. A verse correctly refers to one line of poetry. It's often confused with a stanza. So if we look at this example here, wild wintry wind, storm through the night. That line, one line, is a verse. Whereas the 4 lines that are separated is called a stanza. There are different kinds of stanzas. So here we've got a couplet, which is 2 lines, a tercet, which is 3, and a quatrain, which is 4. So this is 4 lines. So it would be a quatrain. Now then, in order to understand a poem, it's often a good idea to paraphrase it. And paraphrasing is to refer to it in your own words, just translate it into your own words. So I've done that here for the first stanza. So, wild wintry wind, storm through the night, dash the black clouds against the sky, hiss through the billows seething white, fling the rock surf in spray on high. So if I took those lines of verse and I took them and put them into my own words, I might say, a wild wind storming all night shows dark clouds that hiss and make the ocean surge and spray much water. So I've just translated into words that are mine, so it makes it a little bit easier to understand. And then a couple more points here of rhyme, end rhyme, and rhyme scheme. So rhyme is a pattern of a similar sound. So here we've got night, white. That's rhyme, and that's end rhyme because it occurs at the end. If the rhyme is in the middle, then it would be internal rhyme. Then rhyme scheme is a pattern of rhyme. And the way that we write this is by looking at the last words in each line. So night rhymes with white, and sky rhymes with high. So we start at the top of the alphabet. So night is A, and sky is B, and white rhymes with night, so it's A again, and high rhymes with sky, so it's B again. So if we were to write out the rhyme scheme, it would be A, B, A, B. So that's an introduction just to a few of the basic points. The next thing that I'd like to mention is imagery, because poems really try to recreate one event for the reader. They try to make you feel similar to how they felt or similar to how they feel about an issue. So right here, when we look at this poem, Handbag by Ruth Fainlight, it's very much an image poetry, but it really, really packs some emotional weight to it. It's just describing a handbag. Note the title, Handbag. So it has to be important. My mother's old leather handbag, crowded with letters she carried, all throughout the war. The smell of my mother's handbag, mints and lipstick and Coty powder. The look of those letters softened and worn at the edges, opened, read, and folded so often. Letters from my father. Odor of leather and powder, which ever since then has meant womanliness and love and anguish and war. So when we talk about imagery, we want to understand that it's not just something that we see, but imagery is what appeals to all of our senses. So we can see it, we can hear it, we can touch it, we can taste it, we can smell it. So those might be the images that we see here. So if I were asking you about the imagery in the poem, you might look at the first example that comes up here and say, okay, crowded with letters she carried all through the war. This shows a feeling of loss and a need to keep the many letters near her. They're important. And I ask you, what else do you see, hear, taste, touch, or smell? Well, how about the smell of the handbag, mints and lipstick and powder? It's very female sorts of smells in a purse. The letters are softened and worn. You can see it, you can feel it. You can feel how the letters have been read so many times that the paper is soft, smooth. And what were they? Were letters from my father. So you sense the import there. You have a real sensation of emotion. Odor of leather and powder. So both sort of sense together, sort of soft and hard at the same time. And womanliness of love and anguish. You sense the upset. So you get a sense of feeling, of touch between them. So that gives you a sort of an introduction to poetry and imagery. So that is just your poetry unit, first introduction. And I want you to note that in this introduction, we have not spoken about figures of speech. So figures of speech will be in a separate part. In fact, they're in the next file, figures of speech. So we'll get to that in the next section. So this would be P1.1. That's it for now.